Well, welcome to Christ&Culture. This is Pastor Jeff Short, your Bible teacher and cultural analyst. And today we're going to continue a topic that I took up a couple weeks ago, and that was the death of Ozzy Osbourne and reaction to that death. And one of the strange things we've seen in the evangelical Christian world is that we have a few celebrity Christians, well-known Christians, who have actually eulogized and memorialized and lionized Ozzy Osbourne, the dark metallic rock lead singer of a band called Black Sabbath, which contained a lot of different satanic themes. If you look at their one of their first albums, Ozzy Osbourne's in a graveyard, and it looks like he's some kind of a warlock or some kind of a witch. And he's amidst the tombstones, and you listen to their music, the title called Black Sabbath, the song, and actually contains the description of a black entity, spiritual, dark entity, that it says also that you could see Satan's eyes blazing with fire and all kinds of satanic, almost like the Church of Satan. In fact, I think it was true. I believe this is the report that Black Sabbath, when they kicked off their album, one of their albums, they actually had the kickoff ceremony at the Church of Satan with Anton LaVey, who was the high priest of Satanism at the time in the 60s, late 60s, I think it was. So there's no question that Ozzy Osbourne and his group Black Sabbath played up the image and the symbolism of Satanism. They flirted with that. The whole founding of that band, according to one of the instrumentalists, Geezer Butler, I believe his name was, he said that they studied occult books, ancient occult books. They also read the writings of Aleister Crowley, who is one of the leading Satanists in Britain, and at the turn of the century, just an evil man, dubbed the evilest man on earth. And so they flirted with this, no question about it, and he basically held that sort of image all the rest of his life, even carrying on into his solo career. Ozzy Osbourne was singing about Satan-related themes. He, in fact, wrote a song about Aleister Crowley and raised questions about Aleister Crowley's mission and purpose and all kinds of things. So this man was possessed by an interest in the occult. There's no question about it. So how do Christians react to his passing? Well, it's sad that he had to devote his life to dark themes, anti-Christian themes, satanic themes, occultism. It's sad that a man wastes his life, wastes his talent, whatever singing talent, whatever musical talent he had. It's a sad thing that he wastes it on these evil, anti-Christian, satanic, dark, occultic themes, when he could have been singing for Jesus. He could have been singing for the Lord, giving a solid message of truth and hope to the world. But no, he goes in that other direction, and that's his legacy. That's it. He cultivated his legacy. He reinforced that legacy. He rode to fame on that legacy of satanically themed music and performances. And so his legacy is exactly what he cultivated his entire life. Now, the problem is we have a few Christians who are actually eulogizing him and saying that he was a great man and that they look up to him and so forth. We have one here I talked about last time, Alice Cooper, who is supposed to be a Christian, supposed to be a Bible-believing evangelical Christian, and yet upon hearing of Ozzy Osbourne's death, he proclaimed at one of his performances, he spoke out loud, basically talking to Ozzy out loud. He said, "Ozzy, we'll see you on the other side." Very curious, odd. Why would a Christian say that? Does he think Ozzy Osbourne will be in heaven? On what basis does he have a hope that Ozzy Osbourne would be in heaven? So here's a Christian saying to Ozzy Osbourne out loud, "See you on the other side." What does that mean? What does he mean by that? What is he trying to say? Is this a case of just sentimentality? He's just saying something nice, really actually, as far as truth is concerned, is meaningless. It's just a sentiment that he's throwing out there. Or does he actually believe that all people go to heaven eventually? There are some heretical, anti-Christian sects that actually believe that all people go to heaven. And nobody actually ever goes to hell because God will save everybody eventually. This is the teaching, I think it was about 15, 20 years ago. Rob Bell wrote a book called Love Wins, and he tried to argue that what Jesus really teaches is that everybody goes to heaven and that, in fact, nobody ever goes to hell, which is totally contrary to what the Gospels have Jesus saying. The separation of the sheep and the goats, and so on and so forth. So, no, it's very clear from the New Testament that there are people that go to heaven and there are people that go to hell, and it's all on the basis of one's trusting Jesus, one looking at their own life and looking at their sins and repenting and confessing of those sins and coming to the foot of the cross and humbly accepting the atoning death of Christ for their sins. That's how you get to heaven. You put your trust in Jesus alone, not on your basis of your own works, but Christ alone. And that's what saves you. And those who do not do that, those who continue to rebel against God and refuse to repent of their sins, they do not go to heaven. So universalism is a false teaching. It's a heresy. It has been true that some in the Christian world have flirted with that. I think John Stott was open to the idea that maybe everyone gets saved eventually, or that more. I think his view is more accurately described as people who don't accept Christ simply perish and they never see the light of day. There's no consciousness for them after death, but those who have accepted Christ, they live on in eternity with God. So there are various forms of that, but Alex Cooper seemed to be implying by his comments about seeing Ozzy on the other side, he seemed to be implying that Ozzy would actually make it into heaven. And there is no basis for that kind of statement from the life of Ozzy Osbourne. Quite the contrary, there's all kinds of evidence that that is not the case. So Alex Cooper actually needs to be explaining himself a lot clearer. Well, there's someone else that needs to explain himself very clear, and that is John Cooper. And John Cooper is the lead singer and I think the main leader of the band Skillet. Now, it is a Christian band. It's a Christian heavy metal band. And the mission of Skillet, as I understand it, is to try to reach those who are into the heavy metal scene. So you have a large youth segment of the population who are really into heavy metal, who are into the sort of Ozzy Osbourne, Black Sabbath, Megadeth, all that kind of music, genre of rock. And John Cooper plays in front of crowds of young people who are enthusiastic about heavy metal. Okay, that's a missionary effort. But that doesn't give you a carte blanche license to actually make false statements about heavy metal artists like Ozzy Osbourne. So let's hear what John Cooper says and try to figure out what he's talking about, or at least raise questions about what in the world is he talking about, because he's saying some things that are very incompatible with the gospel and are incompatible with Christianity. And he is usually a very solid voice of biblical Christianity. He was heavily influenced by the apologist and theologian Dr. James White on his broadcast, The Dividing Line. I've listened to Dr. James White for many, many years now, and he is a clear, concise, influential biblical teacher who has influenced John Cooper. In fact, I believe he's interviewed John Cooper. James White has interviewed John Cooper 2 or 3 times. And John Cooper, from all I can tell, he has a podcast of his own. I think it's called Cooper Stuff or Cooper Talk or something like that. But usually he's got a lot of good things to say. And he speaks to the youth culture especially. And he's getting older, but he keeps on putting out the quality content along with the heavy metal music that he uses as an instrument to reach the young generation. So he's doing a great missionary work, but I just want to question him and saying, what do you mean by these statements about Ozzy Osbourne? Because they are incompatible with biblical Christianity. So he needs to clarify himself. So let me give an example of what I'm talking about. We'll stop and start this video. This is a video that was extracted by a website called Doctrinal Watchdog. And I think this guy is also has a website called Evangelical Dark Web, where he analyzes Christian leaders and movements for biblical truth. So let's roll this video and see if we can make sense of what John Cooper is trying to say, because I believe he needs to make either a clarification or correction, because this just doesn't make sense. Let's roll the video.
One of the first rock and roll metal singers I ever heard in my life, and I'll tell you what, I loved it. Zakk Wylde's one of my favorite guitar players of all time as well, and of course Randy Rhoads. But it's a sad day for rock music, and I want to give a shout out to Ozzy. I didn't know him, never met him or nothing like that. We are not.
Okay, he's giving a shout out to Ozzy, which is kind of a strange thing because Ozzy is dead. He passed away. He died. He was getting older. A lot of these aging rockers are getting older. It seems like every other week or so, an aging rock star, classic rock star, is dying. And you can think of, for example, who was it? It wasn't the Rolling Stones band, because they're still going, even though I think it was Greg Laurie who said they actually haven't died yet, but they look like they've died. So they're getting really old, but they keep on playing. Every other week or so, it just seems like an aging rock star dies. But to give a shout out to someone who just died, that's kind of strange. But that's okay. That's not the worst of what we hear John Cooper talk about. And it's not even anything that really needs to be explained. I think what he's just trying to say is he's trying to bring attention to the audience that Ozzy Osbourne died. He really liked Ozzy Osbourne. I think Ozzy Osbourne and his bands have inspired John Cooper to go into this ministry to evangelize young people who are into heavy metal. So there probably is a very meaningful connection here, but giving a shout out to a dead person is kind of strange anyway.
Friends, unfortunately, but the reason is because one thing I learned, we've traveled the whole world playing music, and one thing that I've learned is this: it doesn't matter what country you come from, what language you speak, what color your skin is, how much money you make, what you believe about politics, what you believe about religion. One thing is for sure: music brings people together all around the whole world.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, I've heard a lot of different people say this, and it is true to an extent. I heard, for example, Lauren Daigle, where she was given many opportunities in the mainstream media and interviewed by big networks, CBS and Oprah network and everything. And they want to ask her to say something. And she's, again, another person who's supposed to be a Christian, evangelical, Bible-believing Christian, outspoken in her Christian faith, belief in Jesus Christ. And so that's great. And we need more Christians in places of public responsibility and visibility. That's great. But she's given this great big platform to say something about Jesus, and what does she say? This was now 3-4 years ago. What does she say? Well, she said the same thing. Music, I just can't get over the fact that I love to present the message of music because music brings all people together, and it's one thing that people can agree on and unify around, and so on and so forth. So, again, she's saying the same thing that has been repeated by other artists, secular artists especially, but now it's something, it seems like a go-to thing to say for Christian artists when they're not sure what else to say, and that is that music can bring people together. Well, yes, it does, but it can also divide people. It depends on the kind of music. Because, for example, in the Nazi regime, they utilize music at their big rallies. If you go on YouTube and you look at the black and white footage of their films or propaganda films, there was music of ancient German folk songs. There was all kinds of music, and it brought the Nazis together. It unified Germany. It brought them together to actually invade nations of the world. Wars and armies have marched with the same song they're singing. So, yeah, it brings people together, but that's not something that, as Christians, we would say is always good. Maybe it's not good that music brings people together if it's not the right kind of music. For example, music brought the hippies together at Woodstock. Was that a good thing? If you look at the, again, video footage of the documentary Woodstock, you see a lot of people doing a lot of different things, and they're not doing just good things. They're doing bad things. That was a time there was this free love, drugs, sex, rock and roll. It brought a lot of young people together in a big field on a muddy and rainy conditions to listen to music, to camp out in commune-style living arrangements. Young people involved in all kinds of sexual experiences, immoral sexual experiences, young people involved in all kinds of taking drugs of every type, LSD, all kinds of pills, popping pills, listening to rock music. Yeah, music brought them together. In a sense, a unity brought them together to listen to music and then participate in immoral sex and dangerous illicit drugs. So, and alcoholism and all the other things that go along with partying like that, and debauchery and hedonism. So yeah, music can bring people together. All over the world, it can bring people together. But in saying that, that's not something profound. And I'm just wondering why John Cooper chose to say that tired saying that music brings people together, even though it's obvious, yeah, it does bring people together, but it's not always for a good reason. So why say that? I don't know. That's a question I would ask John Cooper.
I think it's the one thing we all understand. You start playing music and all of a sudden everybody's on the same page. And people like Ozzy brought a lot of people a lot of hope through their music.
People like Ozzy brought a lot of people a lot of hope through their music. Again, I would ask John Cooper, what in the world are you talking about? Ozzy brought people a lot of hope? His satanically tinged themed music and performances brought a lot of people hope? What do you mean? What are you talking about? In many ways, he brought people a lot of despair. He brought people a lot of dark, depressing, not inspiring, but discouraging thoughts and feelings. I think if you listen, for example, to their album Black Sabbath and then the song Black Sabbath, where they talk about the dark entity at the foot of the bed, and Satan smiling and flames going higher and higher, and Ozzy is crying out, no, I don't want to go down, and implying that Satan wanted to take him to hell. And if you listen to that, and that's your steady diet of rock, how is that bringing you hope? I don't understand. So it makes no sense to eulogize Ozzy Osbourne as some great inspiring leader and someone that young people should look up to. He's actually doing that here. He may not realize it, but he's encouraging people to get into Ozzy Osbourne. He's encouraging people to go back and listen to the songs of Black Sabbath and the songs of Ozzy's solo career and go through his songs and, I guess, find hope in these songs. This is not a Christian admonition. This is not something you would find, for example, the Apostle Paul or any of the other apostles encouraging the converts at the different evangelistic or missionary settings that they walked around in. They would say, turn away from the works of darkness and turn to the light of Jesus Christ. Now, John Cooper does go on after this eulogizing of Ozzy Osbourne, and then he does talk about how Jesus is really the ultimate hope and how he found salvation and new life in Jesus Christ alone. Yeah, he does go into that, and that's great, and that's important, and that's necessary, and I'm glad he does that. And we don't have that clip here where he goes into sort of a gospel understanding of hope and new life in Christ. But to lead up to it by actually saying things that are not true, these are not true statements. He says, if people like Ozzy. So you have a number of different bands like Ozzy Osbourne, like Alice Cooper, some of these other metal bands with their dark minor chords and their dark and depressing and some of them satanically tinged music and performance. They are not bringing people hope. Their message is not a message of hope. It is what they're feeling in their lost state. You know, they take drugs, they drink alcohol, they get drunk, they get high, they engage in all kinds of sexual debauchery. They're lost people. They're looking for answers. That's why Ozzy and his band Black Sabbath and Ozzy and his solo career and musicians, why they are always looking to the occult and different odd, strange beliefs. Aleister Crowley reading books by this evil satanic leader of another generation. They're looking for answers. They're searching. And so their search, unfortunately, can drag a lot of young people into the gutter, and it can bring a lot of people into the darkness. So, no, Ozzy did not bring a lot of people a lot of hope. No. Through their music. No, he did not. So let's see what John says at the end here. Oh, that was it.
I understand. You start playing music and all of a sudden everybody's on the same page. And people like Ozzy brought a lot of people a lot of hope through their music.
So there you have it. People like Ozzy brought a lot of people a lot of hope through their music. And I just say, no, I don't see that. So what do you mean? I guess I would ask John Cooper, what do you mean by that? Because you've got a lot of explaining to do to try to explain yourself in raising up such a bad influence among youth. Again, just go back from the very beginning of Ozzy Osbourne's career to the very end, and you look at the themes that he dealt with in his music. You look at the themes on the album covers. You look at the way he conducted his performances. You look at his interviews. You take all of that together. You take it all together. And there's one thing you would not conclude, and that was you would not conclude that this guy is a follower of Jesus. You would not conclude that he's trying to bring the world the gospel of hope, good news in Jesus Christ, the light of Christ. You would not claim that he would bring anyone to that. In fact, at the very end of his life, you would probably conclude he was still looking and searching as a lost soul. He was heavily involved in substance abuse pretty much his entire life. He once said in a documentary I learned from Good Fight Ministries, Joe Schimmel compiled this documentary called They Sold Their Soul to Rock and Roll. And in a segment where he dealt with Ozzy Osbourne once made the statement in an interview that he felt that something was possessing him when he was creating his music, and that he was afraid of who that was, Satan. So he was suspecting that he might have been influenced by actual Satan to create the lyrics and themes of his music. So no, this is not someone you hold up in front of a crowd and say, "Oh, he was a man of hope, and he spread hope with his music," and so on and so forth. No, we're talking about Black Sabbath, Ozzy Osbourne. We're talking about the man that pretty much everyone is familiar with, and that is not a message of hope. So how do you get hope from that? John Cooper really needs to explain himself, because he does have the ear of a lot of young people. His music is still selling. He's still touring. He's still reaching out to the metal crowd with concerts and opening up for different secular acts. And he's toured with some of the bigger name bands too. So he has credibility in the music industry. And his voice has been, as far as I was familiar with him, I probably heard of him the last 10 years or so more than any other time. And especially since he was associated with Dr. James White, his theology is pretty solid. But here's an example of something where I don't know if it was just the moment, the heat of the moment, or in front of the crowd of enthusiastic Ozzy fans, that he wanted to say something good about Ozzy, but way over the line he went and started pointing people to Ozzy as a source of hope. No, it doesn't match. It's not consistent with Christianity. And we just need to call John Cooper out on this and say, hey, you got to explain yourself, because this does not make any sense. And it really deserves a clarification and or correction from him to say, hey, I was a little bit over the top there, and here's what I really feel, and explain the truth the way it really is. Well, I hope that's been helpful. We'll see you back next week on another episode. God bless.